A Green Beret Captain once asked me to help him prepare for a conversation he hoped he would never have to have. And what he learned about empathy in our session is something every founder needs to hear. He was about to go through SEER, that's the survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training that every special forces officer must pass before they're sent into combat. And he needed to prepare for a potential scenario if he were deployed to Afghanistan. A local village girl accidentally killed in a line of fire. So I said, let's role play every conversation you might have with the girl's parents, the village mayor, the girl's doctor, the captain's superiors in Washington. And in our first take, his approach, swinging between aggression and defensiveness, was simply coming from his own sense of self-protection. But if it had been a real deployment, that could have turned the villagers into adversaries and raised serious doubts in Washington about his ability to lead under pressure. So I asked him, can you put aside who's right or wrong just for a moment and imagine what this situation looks like from each person's point of view? Could he acknowledge the grief and anger of the parents, address the mayor's concern for his town's safety, reassure the generals in Washington that the situation wouldn't escalate? And after an hour of practice, he could. He was able to toggle fluidly through multiple points of view instead of just his own. And how he handled those conversations would determine whether the villagers would cooperate or sabotage the mission, whether they'd share information or create friction, whether they'd become allies or adversaries. Sound like a familiar dynamic? Well, that's what empathy actually looks like in practice. I'm Renita Calhorn, and I've worked with over 1,000 founders to help them scale as leaders so they can scale their companies. And if you're a founder who thinks empathy is this soft skill you don't have time for right now, this video is for you, because what I'm about to share might completely change how you think about it. Empathy is not being soft or sentimental. It's simply the ability to imagine what someone else is experiencing and understand multiple points of view, even when they're far from your own reality or you don't agree with them. I call it strategic empathy. And most founders aren't leveraging its incredible power. They think they need to be tough, assertive, or detached in order to handle challenging circumstances effectively. And that if they do have empathy, they'll lose themselves in someone else's experience. That'll keep them from making hard decisions or allow people to take advantage of them. And actually, it's the complete opposite. When you can't imagine what someone else is experiencing, you're operating with limited data. People don't feel heard, so then they censor themselves or shut down. And now you're making decisions based on incomplete or distorted information. And there's a whole world of options and solutions that you don't have access to because you're looking at the situation through a very narrow lens. So here's the thing. You don't need to have lived through the exact same experience to understand what someone is feeling. As humans, we all draw from the same pool of emotions, regardless of circumstance. That's how Chris Voss, the former FBI hostage negotiator, was able to connect and de-escalate situations with terrorists. Not because he approved of what they were doing, but because he understood that terrorists are not some alien species. They feel the same basic human emotions: fear, anger, frustration at being unheard. And by the way, if you want to develop this skill in a safe space with other founders who are working on the same thing, I'm launching the High EQ Founder community soon. Check out the description for the link to get on the waitlist. So ultimately, what people want is to feel understood. And when you show them that you understand, or at least want to understand how they see the world, they can't help but trust you more. So where do you start? Well, there are 3 moves. The first move is to simply acknowledge the reality. What's the current reality for your team, your board, your investors? Is it chaos, lack of communication, increasing politics, or turnover? For many founders, this is the hard part. They're so focused on where they're going that they're not fully honest about what the people around them are living with. When I used to take kickboxing classes and we were grinding through hundreds of kicks, the instructor would yell out, "I know, I know." And I would think, oh, she knows this is hard. And I'd feel this burst of motivation. So it could be that simple. Your version might sound like, "I know the team changes have hit you extra hard. You used to have 5 people with you on this project, and now you have 3. Or, "I know the last few months have felt even more chaotic than usual, and the lack of direction has made it hard for you to make decisions." The second move I call taste the lemon. So, given everything they've been dealing with, what are they likely experiencing? Confusion, exhaustion, maybe even grief at losing colleague relationships. This step is hard too, I know, because when you start to imagine what they're feeling, it can stir up feelings that you might have been resisting. But think of it like a lemon. You can imagine the taste of it in your mouth without actually having to eat one. And that's what you're doing here. You're just dipping into the emotion just enough to understand it, get a taste of it without getting lost in it. And the third move then is to reflect it back. Articulate what you imagine they're experiencing specifically enough that they think, yeah, you get it. So with your board or investors, it might sound like, "You've probably been a bit frustrated with the lack of visibility the last 2 quarters. I haven't done a good job connecting the dots for you." This isn't a technique you pull out just for crisis moments, by the way. It's a regular practice, something you build into your daily interactions, your one-on-ones, town halls, team meetings. And when you acknowledge reality this way, observationally, without drama, people notice. They see that you see things clearly, that you're not spinning or avoiding, that you can be trusted to call it as it is. And the more they trust you to see it as it is, the more honestly they'll engage with you. So, as with most emotional intelligence skills, this takes practice. The Green Beret Captain didn't walk into those politically sensitive conversations cold. He did it wrong first, in a safe space, when the stakes were low. Because there are plenty of ways to get empathy wrong: oversharing, over-explaining, coming across as manipulative rather than sincere. And that's exactly the kind of thing we'll be working on in the High EQ Founder community, as I mentioned, launching soon. In the meantime, here's how to start exercising the empathy muscle. At your next meeting, what's one thing you could acknowledge about what your team has been experiencing? There's always something. Start there. I'll be going deeper on strategic empathy in future videos. So if you found this useful, subscribe so you don't miss them. And until then, I'm rooting for you.